Alright, so I bought the VIOFO A229 Plus 2-channel dash cam that I'm going to try to install and capture as much of this on camera as I can. My car is a 2011 Volkswagen GTI. I'm not going to go crazy with trying to run cables through all the headliner and stuff. I don't know exactly where I'm going to run all my cables yet, so I'm probably going to break this install up over a couple of days. What I've already done is I've examined the kit, I've looked at my fuse panel, I've used an online resource to verify what fuses should be available and compared them against what's actually in my car. So I don't have any towing hitch, trailer lights, anything like that hooked up, so those are all empty fuse sockets I can use. But critically, not everything in my car because of that has wiring for me to use it. So I am going to hook up the standby power option for parking mode. I don't really plan to use it, but having the ability to do that once in a while will be nice. But again, I don't really plan to use that because 90% of the time I'm parked at work or I'm parked at home in a garage, as you can see. So I don't really need to worry about that. Occasionally I do go to parking garages or something like that, and that's when I would probably want to turn it on. But with that said, let's jump into the kit and the basic tools you'll need up front to figure out what fuses you can tap into. So I mentioned that I used a website. I used startmycar.com, and within there you can search for the manufacturer, the vehicle type, the year, all that stuff. And you can get views into the different fuse boxes that are around a vehicle. So this is the fuse box as seen inside my car, not the one in the engine compartment or under the car. I don't remember where exactly it is, but it's not one I'm going to mess with. This gives the options for this type of a fuse box with everything that could possibly be in it, as well as some of the reserve ones that aren't necessarily connected, which is what you can see here. So when you mouse over these, it will pop up and tell you what they potentially are for. So this one's headlight range control. Let me get the picture of my vehicle here, bring that in, and you can see this is exactly what I had here. So across the top, we've got 1010, 55, 1010, so I have all of those, even though the functions may not be exactly as listed on this site, because I don't have the trailer and whatever. They're still fused and ready to go. 7 through 11 are blank, just like in this one, and you can kind of see the wires there in number 12, but I don't have the fuse for the central locking for front doors, so my locking is controlled through another fuse module somewhere else. I'm not sure exactly where. Then I have these two, which is the rain sensor. I don't have a rain sensor. I don't know what that fuse is doing. That could be running my central electronics, and the rain sensor could actually be in fuse 12 because I do have front doors. They do lock. I don't have a rain sensor. 14 automatic gearbox. I do have an automatic gearbox. Central locking for rear doors. Don't know why it's a bigger fuse, but hey. And then this one is the rear lid handle release button. Mine is empty. I don't have a release button. I have the emblem that rotates. It is electronic. I don't know where it's powered from, but since I'm plugging in a dash cam that's only using 5 amp fuses, this should be no problem. And because I'm tapping an empty slot, there's no big deal. So I'm just going to tap right in on number 16 there, and that's what I'm going to use for my system. This was just how I kind of did my comparison and figured out what I was going to use, and then just tried to figure it out from there. So, all right, excuse the green background. I'm using my trash can lid as the holder for it. So the H4K kit comes with 2 sets of fuse taps of all different kinds. I have the ones I need. This is a mini and then the full-sized, ready to be added into the wire. My multimeter, so I can check which fuses currently have power from ignition and which ones don't, which ones are battery and which ones are ignition only, and then the actual wiring kit itself. Now on the kit you do have this section here where you can pick, if I can get the lighting right, there we go, focus. You can pick what level of battery protection you want. I think this is a great function that allows you to set how much power you want the car to be able to, or the camera to be able to drain out of the car battery. By default, it was set to 11.8 volts, but that's getting pretty low, and honestly, I'd be worried at that point. I think the lowest mine has gotten is 11.6 before it fails to turn the car over, but it really comes down to the battery. So currently, I have it changed over to 12 volts. That way, if I do leave it on there, it's not going to drain my battery completely dead. But since I rarely plan to use it, I don't know. I may tick it up one, but again, I'll probably leave it on 12 volts as that's pretty good. I think right now my battery's at like 12.2. It's a fairly new battery, but I don't think it even goes up to 12.4. I'd have to check when it's all on power. But anyway, that's that. The camera came with the trim removal tool, which was great to getting into the fuse panel without using a screwdriver. And I'm not yet sure exactly how I'm going to route this. I'll show you the inside of my car in a second and kind of what my thoughts are for this. But that's that part. These fuse taps came with 5 volt or 5 amp fuses already pre-wired into them, which is good. So these will just plug into the fuse box. If I'm taking a fuse out like I would think I will on this one, then you just plug the other fuse into the open spot on the bottom. And the top should be the hot side, so when you plug it in, it'll plug in like that. That's my understanding. I have plenty of space to tuck this away. I don't think I'm going to need to undo this bundle. There's just so much cabling here that there's no need for me to have all of that out and about, and it's going to be easier for me to get to this if it's in the fuse panel. This cable, there's more than enough of this for me to do what I think I want to with routing it. So with that said, let's head over to the car and take a look at what I've got so far. Okay, so I'm at the car. Excuse the dirt, and the garage door is shut because it's cold out and I don't want to be freezing. So this is my fuse panel. This is what I'm working with here. Nothing too outlandish or crazy. Let me slide my phone in here and I'll come around. So I don't know how easy you can see everything in here, but the 2 fuses I'm going to tap into are on this bank and this bank down here. So this one up at the front and this one here, which is number 16, they are connected, they are wired to battery power. So this is going to be where I tap in the battery fuse tap. Sorry, let me grab the taps. So this is the fuse tap. Again, it's going to go wire up from what I believe, and I'm just going to slot it in there or there. I'm probably going to use this one because I don't remember exactly what it is, but I'll go record it off my computer showing you which fuses are which. But they have a ton of stuff in these. Like this is supposed to be front central locking or something as a potential, but mine's not filled and my locks work. So every car model and year and then trim level all have different options within these, but it's wired and that one's wired. So because these are empty, I don't need to pull one of these existing fuses. I'm just going to plug it in and be done with it. But those all have battery power. Now, for the ignition power, I believe this 20 amp fuse is what I'm going to need to tap into because none of these others are wired. I have a bunch here that are wired, but these are all battery powered. So when I checked on my multimeter, they all had power that I don't want to use. So this one's going to come down here and tap into that. And then for ground, I'm either going to tap into this screw or a screw up there that is hard to see at the moment, but that's where I'm planning to do. And then we get into some of the issues, but the actual battery kit, you can see how much space I've got in there, so I can tuck most of the wiring in there, and the box, I will probably use packing tape and attach it right there. If I can get my hand around, there we go, right there. All right, so I've tried to rig up a bit. I've got my light there, just so you can see what I'm talking about here. So when I come down here to this bottom row where the fuse is that I want to tap, I touch on it. Nothing happens on the multimeter. If I come up to this other socket over here where I mentioned it's open, and if I can get in there and touch it, you can see multimeter has action and it's fluctuating, but it goes up to about 12.2 amps all around. My connection isn't the smoothest because of where I'm located. You can see 12.3 amps steady out of that one. So I've got plenty of room on it, and you can see as I'm touching the top of the fuse, the light comes on showing it's solid. But all of these across the top, when I get a right good connection, some of these at the top are ignition only, so I can't use those for the battery connection. These don't have anything in them. These at the top, a lot of them have like ABS functions, headlight functions, things that I don't want to touch. If you're going to tap a fuse, you really don't want something important in case you do blow the fuse. This one down here is for the cigarette lighter, which currently the only thing I use it for as a non-smoker is my radar detector. And that cable's minimal impact, so I don't really care about that. So that's just what you do to check the fuses if you need that information. So let's go get these taps installed on the cable, ready for install. Okay, so this should be fairly straightforward. These just crimp onto the cables, and you just have to know a couple of settings. So ACC is the accessory power. That's going to connect to the larger tap, which is going to non-battery power. This one says battery, which is going to the smaller one, which is going to plug into the empty socket that I have. And then ground is just going to connect into one of those screws in the system, and that's it. So they've got this shielding kind of pre-cut. You just have to pull that off, stick it down inside there, and then you can see where they crimped it. So you just, if you don't have a crimping tool, I don't have that type of wire crimpers. I've got ones for a Cat 5. Needle nose pliers, you just pinch. It should be fine. As long as you make a solid connection in there, that should be it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Well, I never claimed to be super strong, but that's not working so well with the needle nose pliers, so I'm going to have to rig something up to try and get some pressure on that to clamp that down, because my hands are hurting. Probably see the color in my palm from double-handed gripping it, and it just doesn't want to crimp, so let me figure that out. Well, obviously not my best work and not as clean as using a proper crimper, but you can see I definitely got it down there at the right crunch on it. So that one's at least installed. Now, how did I do it? Well, I had to use my ancient Cat 5, Cat 3 crimpers, and instead of using any proper portion, there's a razor blade here for doing some wire stripping. But on the back side, there's this part that folds into the frame. So I initially crimped it with this piece, having the wire tucked out the middle so that it wouldn't get cut. And then I did a final crimp on this upper portion like that. I didn't lock it all the way down because you can do a release on the catch there. So let me crimp the battery one on, and then I think we're ready to go. That was annoying, but I did get it on. Did held it in there. I just wrapped some electrical tape around there to keep everything nice and clean. If you are much stronger than I am, or you have longer needle nose pliers where you can get more of a fulcrum on it, those may work. Otherwise, you can use something like this. Again, not ideal, but it got the job done in the end. And now I have everything ready to be installed in the car. Now, I'm not going to actually put it in the car right now. I've got some things I need to think about first, but let's go take a look in the car about what I'm talking about. All right, so I am here in the car in my seating position. Rear view mirror, all that good stuff up there. My camera placement is going to probably be around there. I've got my toll tag above it, so I'm probably going to put the camera right around there. It's got some static pad that I'll put on, but I want the bulk of the camera to be up behind the mirror out of my sight. The only thing I need to get to is the little button to store recordings. Outside of that, none of it is really all that important to me. So the other issue is that the power to the camera plugs in on this side, and the rear camera out comes on this side. So that's going to be very annoying, because that means that to get this cleanly installed easily, because I'm running two wires up, one up to the camera to power it, and then one out of the camera and then to the back of the car to power the rear camera. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to tuck all that in on the same side. Now, I can certainly do that, having the cable come up this side and down around and just plug in on the other side and the other one come in, but there's only so much room up here above this headliner before I'm out of space. So, of course, I'll drop the phone. Let's just put you there. So if we come up here and look, I can scoot forward so I can get up there. If we get up here and look at the headliner, there's plenty of room in here to just shove a cable right in that little gap. This panel does come down and off. I'm not going to mess with it. Now, there are other ways that you can run this. This whole A-pillar trim comes out. Behind the airbag indicator is a little screw, and then the rest of it you can pry off. And when you pry it off, let me stack that up there, this piece kind of lifts up and out, and you can run the wire because the fuse panel is right down there. And I can get in the fuse panel and just route it right up into this piece from there. The issue I have with that is, again, that's taking this whole thing off. There's an airbag in here that comes down and out, so you got to be careful not to damage that. But there's a gap up here in the windshield as well that I'm thinking I can utilize. So instead of running 2 wires and trying to tuck them in, because again, up in here, I can stuff 1 wire on that side up into the trim without too much of an issue, and then route it across the upper part of the ceiling to where the camera is going to be placed over here. So I can have the rear camera come out, go up to the headliner, around and down, and then the one that powers the camera can go all the way across the front, up the opposite side pillar, and then it can go up to the ceiling and come in. At least where I'm visually looking, I want everything decently neat and nice, but I don't want to have to take apart my headliner up above. I don't want to take apart that console for controlling the sunroof and trying to mess with stuff. There's room in there. There's lots of room to run wires. But again, I want to make this something I can take out and transplant to a new car without having to take this one all apart to do it again. All right, so just to give you an idea, I've got the cable tucked up under the windshield coming out over there, and then the upper headliner, it's easier to tuck the cable into. That side's a little bit too tight, so I got to figure that out. And then this is how much cable's hanging out, and I believe where it'll plug in will be about there. Sorry, focus. Somewhere around there is where I'll be trying to put the top. But you can see I need to shuffle this down a bit because this is where that ends now. And I need to get this at least down in this cavity. I wanted to tuck it in over here, but I'm guessing that's where all these are gonna have to go. I don't want this in the cabin of the car. And I was gonna route the rear camera cable down the bottom and around the floor, but the problem is that by the time I get it up and in and over to the camera, which will be down here, I don't have enough cable then to go down and up into the back of the car back there. And then I'm going to figure out how to route this cable now, because I'm going to try to tuck it around this and go up the front. And that should give me just enough room to have this thing tucked in about here, if I can do it right. I can get this trim piece off without issue, but getting it from there out the front is what the problem is going to be. So let's see. All right, so let me show you what I've got now that the camera's working. I will figure that out later because I'm an hour behind troubleshooting on fuses. I don't really have time to mess with tucking that in. The trim removal tool that came with the camera here, it's a bit too big to pry off of that airbag thing. I was going to try the same thing over here, but it just didn't come off. So I've got more for computer repair stuff. I have a couple computer toolkits that'll do a much better job. Oops, focus. That should be small enough to get in there and pop that off. So at some point I may take this trim piece off and run it up there. It tucked in nicely in the front of the trim piece. It did, you can see, create a bit more of a gap in the trim, but that's really a minor inconvenience at the moment. It tucked nicely behind the windshield wiper lip on that. And then over here you can see where I shoved the trim out of the way. Again, down here the trim's not really connected to anything, it just sits in there, so it was no real major issue. If I take it out, the trim just kind of snaps back into place, and then it follows the gap in the trim. And then I shoved again this trim piece out of the way to create a space for it to route down into the fuse panel. Now I was again going to take this trim piece off so that I could route the cable up inside the corridor. I took this piece off and you can see I kind of wrapped it around. There is a path that goes that way, and I can see through the AC venting the path out to the front window. So if I could lift this up a little bit, I could easily do it, but at the moment I don't have time to take this off, take the screw out, pop all the clips that hold this to the A-pillar, and then lift that whole thing off. It would just take me like another 30-40 minutes. I just don't have that time today. So for now, what I'm doing is, as you saw, and then down here, this upper clip, I'm not actually clipping it in place. I'm leaving it undone because the cable's creating that loop and I don't want to pinch the cable. This is kind of a soft foam plastic, but this trim piece moves enough. This is in there pretty well, but it does just kind of pop out. And with the fuse panel, let me grab that. All right, so with the fuse panel cover, you can see these clips get very close to the end there, but this inner piece kind of slides around the corner, and you can see everything still kind of clips together. This inner piece is going to get pushed in, but once I clip it in, it should be pretty flush. And because I left this loose, there's just going to be this little bit of a panel gap. So this is where the door pushes on it. There's not really going to be any major impact to the cable, because you can see it kind of snakes on the back side of that. If I can get all these to clip in now, you can see it's not as flush as it once was, but when the door shuts, let's watch the cable, nothing. There's enough of a gap here that it should be fine. And now I'm in the car, and we're ready to mount the camera. The cable is going to come out up here, and again, I have some small sticky adhesive ones that are going to help hold that in where it comes out. But instead of clipping it this way, what I'm going to do to help keep the cable up is I'm going to run it like this into the top of the camera about there. So that's my install for the moment. It's not too bad, but a headache. This part's pretty well tucked in, so that's not going to come out. That cable's very annoying. I'd like to tuck it away, but if I'm honest, unless I'm actually looking at it, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Okay, so this is what it looks like right now. Again, I don't have the cable clips to make that a little better. And this big ferrite, whatever signal thing is pulling it out. So when I get the clips, I'll be able to clip that in better. But I've got the rear camera tucked in. It's running a firmware update right now that I pre-set up on the thing. This is really not ideal at the moment, but again, I don't have the clips, so right now it's going down to the floor. Let me get out and show you. It's going to get clipped to the B-pillar here, and then it's routing under the floor, and then it tucks under the seat, tucks behind the seat, and you can see it comes up here by the seat belt, and I will again clip this in place, and then it loops around. I got extra cable here, and then it routes up through the upper trim to the actual camera there in the back. Now the car is off, and as soon as I plugged it in, it kicked in and started doing the firmware update. So I need to go in and set the accessory mode on this so that it just, because I don't want it running when the car's not at the moment. There's no point. I talked about it already. I just don't need it doing anything while the car is not actually running. So I think it's doing its reboot right now after the firmware update, and then I'll pull the car forward, play with the settings, and see what we get. All right, so I got my clips in. Let's show you what we got here. You can see I just clipped that little piece up there. Now the cable's pushing on the foam connector a little bit, that it's adhered to the window, so that moved a tiny bit, but I can always fix that if it comes off. Could probably clean the window a little better. It seemed to get pretty clean, but not all the way. That's it for this part of the car. If I come to the back of the car, here you can see I fixed it to the already damaged ceiling, so I don't really care about that. Keeping it out of the way of the airbag. Another one there by the hook. Another one there when we get down to the plastics. Another one there to keep it aligned with the back of the car. Another one there keeping it clear of the seat belt. And then it goes under the frame for my seat, under the mat. And then it comes along the floor, tucked under the seat, and then it vanishes actually behind the seat, runs in the channel back there. And you can kind of see where it comes out there. And I put a little clip there to hold it against there so nothing can really damage it. Pops up out of the top right there into a little clip that contains the service loop for a little extra space. You can see there's plenty of room there between everything. All right, so what did I use? I got these 50 pack of these 3M little clips. You can see there's a little pressure in there to keep a single wire down, not a big deal. For the double one that I ran through, just used the scissors there and cut out that little piece of plastic, and then it holds on there pretty well. Not too bad, they're pretty small. I've seen other VIOFO kits come with these, so $7 to get 50 of them, not the end of the world. And overall, for the install, I'm very pleased with it because I wanted it to be reasonably stealth, installed cleanly without too many issues. But I also wanted to be able to remove it at some point without a big deal. And I think this is going to work. The only thing I need to do is dial in the angle on this rear camera a little better. And then I need to get some better recordings of driving, which will be tomorrow night. I have somewhere to be tomorrow, so I will get some nighttime recordings. And then I'll cut all this together and we'll take a look at what the output quality is. But as far as the install goes, not too bad. Just takes a little bit of time, a little bit to plan it all out. The only person who really comes in back here is my daughter, who gets in and scoots across the back seat. So the way that's tucked, she's not really going to kick that in any way that's going to harm it. And then it's tucked out of the way there on the side. The only part that kind of sticks out is up here at the top. But again, I went around the airbag. I don't really use my handle. It goes up over the sun visor there, which I do use occasionally, but I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. And that's it. I'll find out how well that works tomorrow because I will use the sun visor when I head out. Alright, so I have about 6 minutes of rolling footage that I'm going to cut between, basically showing different stuff. So this was my first drive, and I wanted to drive at this time frame with the sun coming at the camera. I did buy the ND filter on it, and as you can see, outside of some dirty window and harsh glare right at the sun, HDR and everything's doing a good job of picking up what's on screen. And even from this angle with the sun hitting the camera, we are able to, from a reasonable distance, make out some of the license plates. Unfortunately, from too much of a distance, it's not the best. This is that same intersection from the rear camera, and we'll see as I come past these cars, we can capture a couple of the license plates, but they fade out fairly quickly, unfortunately. And again, this is best case because the sun was hitting them. This is me driving behind another car with the sun behind me. Again, best case scenario for the camera because the sun is directly illuminating the license plate, and from this distance, which is about 4 or 5 car lengths, you can't see all that much, and then it comes into view and then we get a good view of the plate, so it does capture it and then you can move on. This was before I'd activated the GPS function on the display here, so some of that'll change later. But from the rear view, same approach. These are the cars that were behind me. Just a few moments later, after that stop sign, you can see the sun blocks that one out until it gets kind of closer, especially when it goes behind that telephone pole or power pole. Then you can catch it, and then when the shade blocks that, you catch the Honda. Now my rear window has factory tint on it, which makes it a little difficult, so I did boost the exposure on that by 1 point, and it kind of evened it out. I may need to do it again, but I'm trying not to blow out the image. Now this view here, we've got a Subaru on my left, and we can see from kind of the extreme left side angle where you might get some aberration in the lens and such. You've got a decent view of the license plate, and you can clean it up and make it out. But this is basic twilight. The sun literally set a few moments ago, and you can see how hard it is to make out some of these license plates like that truck until they're really close. But this was a good capture of kind of the extreme edges. There's that Subaru on the right side as I merge onto the highway. Can't make it out from the rear window. Here's a different truck. You can kind of see some of that. You can clean it up and make it better, but not the best. I don't think the rear camera has the Starvis sensor in it. I think it's just a regular camera, but I'm not positive. A bit later in that same journey, we're almost to nighttime, and this image looks really good. Really difficult to make out a lot of the license plates unless my headlights are hitting them and we get close enough. But again, you can see the motion here, and that's what I'm trying to show in these cars that are zipping by on my left. Motion blur really kind of kills it. Now, you can go back and kind of freeze frame and isolate something that is usable, but for the most part, it's really difficult to just read and make it out, but it's not too bad. It's a little better than I expected, but I was hoping a little better on the motion blur. This is kind of that same area from the rear, which is really bad. Now my rear window was a little bit dirty, but the glare off of those headlights in the road is really bad. This one is really hard to see, and that's also why I didn't want to boost the exposure too high on the rear, because those headlights would just completely wash it out. Now you can see my braking illuminated that BMW's license plate enough to kind of clean it up and make it out, but it's extreme angle and you might not capture it properly. Motion blur on the others is going to be pretty bad. Now this is later driving home at full nighttime. I'm coming up behind this minivan. You can see my headlights are illuminating it, and you can see it pretty decently thanks to the LED light illuminating the plate on their end. But my headlights kind of help it out a lot with xenons or LED headlights. If you have halogens, it's not going to be quite as good. But this is the main camera with the Starvis sensor. You can see stars up there at the left side, and the street signs are very readable, so that's great. This is the rear camera passing that same minivan. Very rough image. You'd have to do a lot of cleanup work in Photoshop or something to try and capture it. I'm not going to show that here just because that's not the point of this video. But this is a bit later, and again, really washed out view with a high lifted truck with the cars behind me. But when they get close enough to my brake lights, you can kind of clean it out, make it out. But outside of that, not the most visible image. So a little bit disappointing, but on the whole, I'm really pleased with my purchase. If something did happen, I would have at least enough footage to show that I may not be at fault or to explain the situation, which is great. And this was just a couple days ago on Christmas Eve, and you can see some of the reason why I bought the camera, because I had these happen just about every journey. Hello, not stopping. I could see him coming through the window, so I was prepared for it, and it happens all the time. So I think this was a great purchase. I totally love how it's integrated with my car. It turns on perfectly. I haven't really tested parking mode yet, but I think it'll be fine. And the GPS functions aren't too bad. The speed's not perfect, but on the whole, hope this was a helpful video for you.